What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 49ers Web Zone No Huddle podcast, partnered with Odyssey. I am Brian Rennick. I am joined by the great Al Sacco. And joining us, moving from the porcelain throne to the podcast throne, Mr. Zain Nakvi. Zain, physically, how you feeling today, buddy?
I can't believe you use it on air, dude.
Zain has Ebola for our listeners there.
I don't have Ebola. All right, so yeah, I had a little bit of stomach flu.
But he's back. He's fighting through pain.
Zain, did you go on a cruise? Because that's typically where the norovirus just absolutely lives, is just on cruises.
No, but we went to a gathering where like 6 other people got sick. So
brutal.
Including like my daughter got sick, man. It was rough. But on the mend. Yeah. Feeling good. Feeling a little bit lighter, which is great. Lost some pounds, but damn it, I want to do a podcast intro. Like, it's been 3 weeks since I've done one, and I can't do one unless they win. So they got to win this week, right?
That's right. It is Zain is our victory. Well, I was gonna say victory Monday, but at the very least, just victory intro. And it's been a minute since you've been able to do one. So let's hope that that this week is the week. But before we preview Week 8 against the Rams, we were going to have a special guest today. Jason Aponte of Niners Nation was supposed to join, or Niners Nation, was supposed to join us. But he is sick today. So
he was on
we
the
didn't
same
get Jason.
I was, apparently.
There it is. We didn't get Jason, but we did get Zain back. So we're good to go there. But one of the things we were going to do with Jason, and we will still do it today, is kind of take a look at the state of the franchise, or at the very least, the state of the 2022 season for the 49ers. And Al, right before we started talking, you wanted to talk about kind of like the ups and downs that this season has provided. And I like to use a term, and so I'm going to get you to expound on that. But what we've realized is that the 49ers in this 2022 season, the one thing that they've been for us is emotional terrorists. What do we mean by that?
Yeah, and not only in the 2022 season, but I think the Kyle Shanahan era and this past week or so was kind of a perfect example of that, because you have like this massive excitement with Christian McCaffrey, right? And I think the fan base was as excited as I can remember about anything. And then you go to Sunday, and all of a sudden it's this massive letdown where it was a really sobering experience where you played. Everybody's hoping the Niners are a Super Bowl team. Well, they played a Super Bowl team, and they looked like a JV squad versus varsity, frankly. And that's a little bit sobering. So you had this massive letdown. And, you know, it's funny when you think back to 2017, right? When Shanahan got hired, everybody's super excited, right? And then they're 1-10, and it's a letdown. But then Jimmy comes in, and you're 5-0. And again, there was so much excitement around the franchise. And then they start 1-2 in 2018, and he blows out his ACL, and it's a lost season. But we draft Nick Bosa, and 2019 was this great year, and they're going to win the Super Bowl, right? They're up by 10 in the fourth quarter, and they lost the Super Bowl. But it's okay, because there's going to be a revenge tour, and we got the team coming back, and then everybody gets hurt, and you're 6-10. But that's okay. They're looking at Watson and Stafford, and they're going to bring in Trey Lance, and there's just going to be a whole new quarterback and a better team, and then we get Jimmy again for a year. And they make a run, but it's the result we all kind of thought it would be. They fell short. So it's super excitement to massive disappointment, and it just keeps going and going and going and going. And maybe Rams week, maybe we get some more excitement, only maybe to be let down again. So that's just kind of where we are right now. And I think before I even told Brian I wanted to talk about this, he used the term emotional terrorism. And that's how I feel. I feel emotionally terrorized right now.
Man, if you think about it, like the 49ers are like the Jimmy Garoppolo of teams, aren't they? Just the wild ups and downs, right? Just roller coaster. They're literally the Jimmy Garoppolo of teams, right? Like sometimes they'll give you hope, and you're like, hey, we may have something here. And then other times they just do crushing things to you, right? But I want to talk about last season a little bit. And the Niners, if they lose, I don't know if they're going to lose on Sunday, but if they do lose, they're 3-5 going into the bye. Same exact point they were last year. And that's kind of hard to reconcile, knowing the roster that they have right now and knowing that they probably should have won several of the games that they have lost. Like the Chiefs game, fine. Like all three of us, like, well, I mean, Brian, you picked the Niners to win, but like Al and I I think you went with your heart, but in your mind, like you probably knew that like it was going to be a tough sell, right? So we knew that they probably weren't going to beat the Chiefs, but all the other losses that they've had they're all winnable games. They're teams that they should have beat, and to be sitting even like one game above what you were last year at the bye, and last year was a total train wreck before the bye. They were awful last year. I think that we should probably understand that like they need to win this game more for a psychological sense, because if they are sitting at 3-5 after all, the talent that they've added and everybody that's come back and the talented roster that they have this year and the potential that they've shown on defense specifically, to be stuck at 3-5 would be a major letdown. So I think that it's not a must win because the NFC is just hot garbage this year and nobody's separating themselves besides the Eagles, who keep making trades, by the way. Like Robert Quinn, like I mean, they're just loading up, right? Like it's unbelievable. But nobody's really separating themselves outside of a couple of teams at the top, and especially in this division. But I really think psychologically they need to win this game, because going into the bye, you can get healthier. You have guys coming back. Jason Verrett was activated from PUP this week. He's going to be hopefully with the team for the rest of the season. Jimmy Ward is going to be moving to a new spot. We'll talk about that a little bit. But I don't know. I don't know if it's a must win, but it's a very, very nice to have win if they can.
Yeah, it's definitely 3-5 is not where you want to be. 3-4 is not where you want to be. Let's be perfectly honest. And I realized somebody tweeted out, or somebody asked on Twitter yesterday, like, what are you in terms of like your 49ers predictions this season? And I realized that I'm 3-4, just like the 49ers. And I was like, man, such a homer, because what that means is I've picked the 49ers in every game so far this season. So obviously I expected them to go undefeated at this point, but they have not, as we know. But, I also had a bit of a revelation as we were talking about, you said or the 49ers are the Jimmy Garoppolo of franchises. I'm pretty certain in an episode, like last episode, or maybe one before, we talked about how Kyle Shanahan is the Jimmy Garoppolo of head coaches. And the revelation I had is maybe what it is you are whatever your quarterback is. And if your quarterback is that, then that's what you are as a team. And honestly, that's what you are as a coach. And so, I know that Al and I had a fair amount of ire to point at Shanahan's way this past Sunday. Mm-hmm. And I think I genuinely think that part of it is just simply that he just doesn't have the quarterback that he wants or needs to run this offense to the level that he wants to. And so it feels like these offensive woes have a lot more to do with him. I'll say just not knowing how to call the game with a guy that he can't trust. And it's obvious that he doesn't. Now, what I don't understand is he spent an entire season doing it last year. So why is this season so much different? But I'm not sure. But I do know this. The 49ers have historically under Kyle Shanahan been a second half team, and patterns and trends, they are what they are. I don't want to hang my hat on that idea that they are a second half team in the season. They are not a second half team in games, or at least again, not this season, but this to end this what I would consider a nightmare stretch to start the season with a victory over the Rams, to go into the bye with some good vibes, right? As hopefully, Christian McCaffrey has a great game. I assume that he's going to be a large part of the game plan. Hopefully the defense kind of rights the ship a little bit, which they tend to always do against this Rams team. Like, just going into the bye with just a little bit of goodwill, I think will go a long way for this team as we gear up for what is hopefully a playoff run.
Zain, I got to disagree with you with the NFC is hot garbage. We talked about it on the last show. I went through the playoff teams. The Giants are winning 10 games. The Giants have Detroit. The Giants have Washington twice, and they have Houston, I believe. Dallas, I think, is good enough where they're going to win 10 games. So I think the Niners have to win the division. That's where I'm going right now. I don't know that. I don't think 9-8 is going to get a playoff spot. I don't know if 10-7 will either. It depends on tiebreakers and things like that. So I do think they have to win a division. And Brian, to your point a little bit, where I just have to disagree a little bit, is quarterback's very important, but Does Brian Daboll have the quarterback he wants? He's 6-1.
Good
Did
point.
Mike McCarthy have Dak Prescott? They're 5-2. And again, the quarterback is important, and you're not going to win long term without one, obviously. But I think one of we talked about Shanahan ad nauseum. Just one of the excuses that's always there. Well, he played with a backup quarterback. Okay, well, other teams do too, or other teams don't have the QB that they need too. And I'm not saying he should go 11-5 or 11-6 now, whatever, with a backup quarterback. But they're atrocious. It's like, what is it, 7-30 or whatever the hell it is? So it's like one of those things too. Again, it just goes back to like, if you're the offensive genius, why is nothing translating? Why is nothing being coached up on the field? Yeah, I'm thrilled you're scheming everything up. Why our things are not working on the field? So I'm just to the point in again, maybe it's the New York fan in me, the Yankees, for those of you guys who don't pay attention, right, or, to East Coast stuff. The Yankees just made the ALCS, and Yankee fans literally want everyone fired. It's just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of the mindset here, I guess. I don't know if it's different, but that's kind of where I am with Shanahan. Like, look, I understand there's been excuses, and a lot of them are very valid. I understand there's been injuries. I understand there's been issues, but where I am with you right now, with Kyle, I'm tired of the inconsistencies. You have a terrific roster. If you're that great of an offensive coach, it should translate to the field a little bit more than it has. So I'm done with the excuses. I want to see results. It's where I'm at. I want to see a playoff team this year. And if you didn't do it, then next year, you know what? You're on the hot seat. If you don't do it next year, we're on to the next coach. That's kind of where I am with it right now.
I also bristle when people defend him by saying, well, but what about the quarterbacks? And my response to that is, who's responsible for bringing the quarterbacks in? Who's responsible for choosing who plays quarterback? It's Kyle Shanahan. It's Kyle Shanahan. And so, yeah, sure. Has he had to play with a lot of backup quarterbacks? Absolutely. I mean, you could argue that, he hasn't had a QB that isn't a QB2, right? Even with Jimmy Garoppolo playing. And that's a little shade, but it is what it is. But Kyle Shanahan is the one that picks quarterbacks. Also, who's responsible for coaching up those quarterbacks? Who's responsible for picking the coach who coaches up those quarterbacks? So, there isn't a business on this planet that if it underperforms profit-wise, that a CEO gets 6 years and then each year is, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about this? No, they get fired. And this is a money-making business. Let's not front on that. That's what a football team is. It's a money-making endeavor. And so, I think he's had more than enough chances to kind of prove himself. And I don't know that he has. Now, again, the argument will be, well, he took a team to the Super Bowl. They've been to 2 NFC championship games. Sure. You're right. They have. But what about the seasons when they didn't do that? Right? Those are 2 seasons. We're in year 6, right? What did they do outside of that? That's great. But also, did they win those games? They won 1 NFC championship game, and we will probably celebrate that in what? 2029, right?
That's throwing some shade.
Yeah. And then
we only hang Super Bowl banners here.
Right.
Isn't that what
and then Mike Holmgren's grandson will be coaching the team, and then they'll bring back Kyle, and then we'll have the same debate on whatever social media platform. Like, who was the better coach?
Yeah, Ned Holmgren or Kyle Shanahan 10 years from now, whoever the hell.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's just, but this is just the first time we talked about it last show too. I just think fans are genuinely frustrated, and it's okay. Like, I feel like if you are a fan and you expect teams to win Super Bowls, and I feel like you're a 49ers fan, you should hold them to that expectation, even though it's been a while. So it's okay to be frustrated, and it's okay to demand more. And I think, a lot of people want to say, who would you hire to replace him? We're not saying we want him fired right now. That's not what I'm saying. We're saying that we need results right now. And in terms of, you have to see who comes up in hiring cycles and things like that. Nobody was talking about Nick Sirianni a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. Dable's been a hot name for a year or two, but 3 years ago, things, guys come up. There are other coaches out there. And that's the thing. It's like, everybody's like, well, another thing that gets to me is when people say, well, you remember what it was like before Kyle? Well, I remember what it was like with Walsh and Seifert and Mariucci. I remember that. It's not like it's the end all be all because you had bad coaches for a little while. I remember it was like with Harbaugh, the Niners have had more good. I know there was a bad bunch in there, but over the last 40 years, the Niners have had 5 good coaches. They really have. They've maybe had 6 bad ones, but if he's not getting it done, like Bill Parcells, you are what you are. And right now, this is a great roster that's underachieving. And if they continue, I'm not saying they could win the Super Bowl this year. I don't know. It could change. But if they continue to underachieve, yes, the conversation has to be had going into next season that it's kind of a do or die year for him, in my opinion. But like Zane, you said, it's a different year, but they were 3-5 last year. They did change it around. Could they do it again this year? We'll see. I think it's going to be harder to get in the playoffs, even though maybe the NFC isn't as good, if that makes sense, because the records, I think, are going to be better.
Yeah.
And let's also not front. This is a better team this year than last year.
100%.
They are.
Yeah.
They're a much better team this year. Overall, from top to bottom, they're a much better team. But I do want to caution by saying this, that everybody points to last year and the turnaround in the second half. It's like a lot had to go right for them to be able to pull that off, right? Like you had a game against Dallas where basically your defense locked them up and just held on by the skin of your teeth because Dak Prescott ran the ball when he should have thrown it at the end. And then you had that blocked punt for a touchdown in Green Bay that got you to the championship game. So I think that the theme, though, is here that if you just get into the tournament, anything can happen. And I think that that's what the goal should be, Al. Like, I really agree with that just make the playoffs and then we'll see what happens, because we know they're not going to be a top seed this year. We know that, right? They're too far back at this point. But they can still get a home game with the division win, and that's how they're going to have to get in the playoffs. I mean, right now, Seattle's sitting up top. I don't believe in Seattle. I just think that that's kind of an aberration over there. But I will say this, and people will flame me for this, and I'll probably flame myself because I hate Pete Carroll. But look at the job Pete Carroll has done in Seattle. Look at what he's done up there with Geno Smith, who's been just like a roster that nobody said anything about. We were talking about the roster as one of the more poor rosters in the league, like a bottom 10 roster. He has got them playing their asses off up there. They just beat the Chargers. They just mollywhopped the Chargers in LA. And the Chargers are a good football team. And they just absolutely stomped them. And they're leading the division now. I don't think they're going to stay there because I just don't think that they'll have the ability to keep it up through the season. But at this point, they're competitive. They play hard. They limit their mistakes, and they capitalize on opportunities from the other team. And this is what Pete Carroll has always done. This is how they got good in the first place. And my question to you guys is that if you swapped, I'm not saying we should fire Kyle Shanahan, right? But I'm just saying, just for example purposes, if we swapped Pete Carroll and Kyle Shanahan and put Pete Carroll in charge of this team, what would they be? Like, what would they be?
What would their record be right now?
Yeah, what would their record be right now?
Great point. I think he's a better coach.
I think they'd have no more than 2 losses.
Right. So I think that, and look, Pete Carroll's, like you said, Pete Carroll's a Hall of Fame coach. Those guys don't grow on trees, right? But that being said, I think that there's nothing wrong with asking more out of a head coach that's supposed to be a genius, right? At some point, you will have to, the advantage that Kyle Shanahan provides has to start showing itself offensively. And the whole quarterback thing, like, I know we talked about it, a while back right now, but like that is his responsibility too. Whenever I hear about Kyle Shanahan, it's about like, oh, play calling, offensive mind. That's not his only job. He's not an offensive coordinator. He is the head coach. It is his strategy. He is, like you said, the CEO of this group on the field CEO. I'm not talking about the 49ers entity. He's the CEO of what happens on the field, meaning he's in charge of the strategy, the course correction when people mess up. He's in charge of the game plan, how he wants the game to flow. He's in charge of the roster in terms of who he wants active. He's in charge of all of that stuff. And if he's not, and they're struggling, then that's a problem. Then you need somebody who will take charge and fix those things. And I'm not saying Kyle should be fired, but I'm saying that this is what I want to see out of him in year 6. And if he's not that guy, like you said, like next year, it sucks because that'll be Trey's first full year as a starter, and he's going to have his up and downs. And if they don't do well next year, then he's firmly on the hot seat. I truly believe that, regardless of what they do this year, if they don't win the Super Bowl this year.
And for people who Brian, you said 2 losses. If people are like, oh, well, how do you figure that? Well, here's how you figure that. If you look at the Niners' 4 losses, they were pretty much in these games or close to it going into the second half, right? Is that fair to say for the 4 losses?
Or even going into the fourth quarter.
in these games, and this is from Nick Wagoner. The 49ers second half this season, they're negative 33 in second half scoring, 28th in the NFL. 7 second half turnovers, fourth most. Turnover margin of -5, second worst. 6.57 offensive points, 26th in the NFL. And an offensive EPA of -1807, 28th in the NFL. So once they get past those scripted plays and adjustments are made after halftime, this team is shitting the bed. Who does that fall on? The coaching, right? I mean, I don't know where else you could put it. And it's happened consistently this season. In the second half, they're shitting the bed and they're losing because of it. Again, there's a disconnect somewhere.
Yeah, and not only that, but this team is consistently one of the most injured. This team is consistently one of the most penalized. This team is consistently one of the most inconsistent. And that all points to coaching. As Herm Edwards said, you're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen, right? When it comes to those penalties, you're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. And so again, we're not saying like we would like to see Kyle Shanahan fired mid-season. Not what we're saying. I don't even want to see him fired after this season. What we're saying is I would really like to see Kyle Shanahan get better. And just like his quarterback, I don't know that he has since being here. Right? Has his in-game management gotten better? Has his has his red zone offense gotten better? Has his game management gotten better? Like all these things, all these little things, right? And so again, like Zain said, Kyle Shanahan is not the offensive coordinator. He is the head coach. And I know that he probably spends a lot of his time coordinating this offense, game planning, things of that nature. And maybe part of the problem is he started to allow that to happen a little bit more with Mike McDaniel and Mike LaFleur, right? Handed a lot of that game planning off to those guys. And now both those guys are gone. So maybe he's tried or maybe he's had to pick up the slack there. And that's part of why we see some of what we see this season. But I mean, the reality is you and Al said it earlier, Bill Parcells, you are what your record says you are. And right now this team is a losing team. They're 3-4. Right? Can they right the ship? Here's what I wanted to do before we move on to previewing. We kind of talked about the playoff picture, right? And honestly, it's not even too soon to talk about it because like you said, Al, it really, really looks like 3 teams are coming out of the NFC East, which means that there's going to be one wild card available to the South, the North, and the West, which makes it even more imperative that this team wins, wins the West. And so let's look at the schedule moving forward. And so here we are, right? This is where we're at. Okay. Let me zoom in a little bit just because I see for our watchers, right?
Yeah.
We're going into week 8, right? We're at LA, and then we've got a bye. So really the season starts week 10, right? The push for the playoff starts week 10.
In best case scenario, you'll be 500 when that starts.
Right. Best case scenario, you go into that week 10 matchup against the Chargers at 4-4. You play the Chargers at home. You go to Mexico City to play the Cardinals. You come home to play the Saints. You actually get a 3 home game stretch there. Saints, Dolphins, Bucks. You travel up to Seattle, home for the Commanders, off to Vegas against the Raiders, and then home week 18 against the Cardinals. Now, again, this team isn't one where you want to go, that's a win, that's a win, that's a loss, that's a win. We have no idea at this point, right? They haven't been consistent enough for us to even gauge that. But on that schedule that you're looking at, and Zain, you said it earlier about the Chargers. I feel like the Chargers are the AFC version of the 49ers. Just incredibly talented and super underperforming. The only difference is they've got a significantly better guy under center than the 49ers do. And so
Brian,
I would bet on that.
Why are they underperforming? Coaching
and
for sure.
They're hurt too,
and injuries.
Yeah,
Coaching
and
injuries,
hurt, right? Again, the 49ers of the AFC, the LA Chargers. Why? Because they left San Diego and they got cursed, just like the 49ers left San Francisco and they got cursed. Regardless, you do look at this and you go, okay, Cardinals not playing well, kind of a dysfunctional team right now. Although they did win their Thursday night matchup against who'd they play last Thursday?
They beat the Saints.
The Saints, that's right. The Saints aren't looking great. The Dolphins, it's hard to know. They've looked okay, right? They're kind of hit or miss. Don't know what's going on with the Bucks, but it's hard to bet against Tom Brady. That Seahawks game in Seattle is always going to be difficult. The Commanders, not a great team. The Raiders, we'll see where they're at then, and then again the Cardinals. And so, we're really talking about for those final 9 games. If they need 10 wins, to win the West or to make the playoffs, they got to go 6-3. They got to go 6-3. And arguably you could say maybe they need 11, then they got to go 7-2, which is exactly what they did last season. They went 7-2 over their last 9.
Do you see 6 for sure wins on that schedule after the bye, assuming they win at the Rams?
I just don't trust them week to week at all. Like Brian said, I don't know what to expect. I thought the Falcons were going to be a win. I thought the Bears were going to be a win. I would say there's no way they're going to lose those games when they started the season. But here we are.
But but all that aside, just roster talent wise, there's really only 2 teams there that match up with them, and that's the Chargers and the Bucks. Every other team in terms of roster talent doesn't hold a candle to what the 49ers have. So technically, those are games that they should be winning. Now, will they? I don't know. That's the problem right now.
I mean, you could sell me that the Cardinals will beat them. They beat them last year. You could sell me that Miami will beat them. You could sell me the Bucks eventually get it together and beat them. You could tell me Seattle is going to beat them. I think right now New Orleans and Washington, I would say, are wins. Raiders, I guess you never know.
They're running the ball really well right now.
Yeah, they really are. So it's like, as much as I don't like Josh McDaniels, they do look better. And as they get used to a system, they may get better as the season rolls on. So I can't look at any of these games and other than maybe the Saints and the Commanders and say, yeah, they'll probably definitely win those games. Not the way they're playing. Yeah. You hope coming off a bye, going, playing the Chargers that they're going to look good. Well, you hope McCaffrey becomes a huge weapon as the season goes on. We'll see, but it's a little scary to me right now. It is. It's definitely scary.
And I hate that. I hate that we can't, have a good idea of what they're going to be doing and what the potential. We know what the potential is, but what they're going to be doing. And I remember with Jim, the funniest thing is that like Jim Harbaugh was in the stands for the game against Kansas City. That was just so funny to me. I'm just like, and probably like a funny moment for him too, because I mean, he is the last really great coach that they had. I mean, there's no doubting that. And when you look at his tenure here, you saw them going game in and game out, and you're like, all right, they're going to have a chance in every single game because they were consistent. And there were games where they lost, especially in the fourth year. The fourth year was kind of a lost season because the management and Trent Baalke torpedoed that. But I can point to a couple losses, even in 2012, I believe, when they lost to the Giants in the championship game rematch here in Candlestick. And it was just like they got trounced by the Giants, and we're like, how the hell did that happen? I mean, he had those games too. And even Kyle, like in 2019, like he had like a really great stretch of games, and then they go and lose to the Falcons near the end of the season. That causes them to have to win at Seattle to win the division. So it seems like all of these silly losses, like they've come in like a larger bunch in earlier this year, and it's just kind of troubling to me because it's like, okay, well, if you're already looking like that, then what's the end of the season going to look like, both in that and in health too? And I agree. It does kind of. We had a comment that it sucks that we don't know this late in the season what the team is going to do, and it is frustrating as a fan. We're not in the building. We're outsiders looking in, and for us, we have to create content and we talk about this. And some of y'all might not like the skepticism that we have, but like it's coming from a place that we just don't know what this team is right now. Like you guys said, like they're a 500 team. You are what your record says you are, and they're a 500 team right now. and that's not good enough to make the playoffs.
And with roster talent, with the roster talent that they have, we shouldn't have to be this unsure, right? Mike Finn, who is prominent on Niners Twitter, he's Ice Cream Judas. He said this earlier today. I hate not being able to be confident in the Niners. It's infuriating. This team is too good to be wishy-washy about them. But here I am, can't say anything because I can't trust them. And that's the reality that we're in right now. And it's frustrating as a fan, right? It's like you go into each week I would love to go into each week confident, right? Wouldn't that be great? And as a Chiefs fan, I imagine that's the case. As a Bills fan, I imagine that's the case. Shoot, as an Eagles fan this year, I bet you that's the case. Mm-hmm. And again, with the level of talent this team has, this should be the case for 49ers fans, and it's not. And that's an issue.
And as we go into this game, this is two really disappointing teams so far. The Rams are second to last in the NFL in points scored, in total points. I mean, that's kind of mind-boggling when you think the Super Bowl champions. And the story for them, for both these teams, the Rams have the fourth most turnovers in the NFL at 13, and the Niners are tied for fifth at 12. The Rams are -5 in turnover differential, and the 49ers are -3. Now, the difference in their last 3 regular season meetings, that's the Stafford era. Basically, the Niners are 3-0, and they're +4 in the turnover department, and they have 2 defensive touchdowns. So that's been a big difference for them. But with this team also, like, let's see, it's both of these offenses that are underperforming. The Rams and the Niners have thrown for 15 TD passes and 14 picks combined this season. The Niners are 6-4, and the Rams are 6-8. That's really bad. They rank 19th and 31st in points scored, respectively. And the Rams have only played the 6 games. So like I said, only Denver scored fewer points. The Niners are averaging 20.7 points per game, and the Rams 17.3 right now. And the Rams are coming off the bye. They're 3-2 under McVay after the bye. They lost to Pittsburgh in 2019 and Green Bay in 2020, both on the road. So we'll see. The Niners have won the last 7 games, except the one that counted in the NFC Championship game. They've won the last 7 regular season games. And we'll see. That's got to end eventually, but the Rams have also kind of been a cure-all for them. So it's a massive game. There may be no Debo. Debo did not practice. We're recording this on a Thursday. There may be no Juwan Jennings. There's going to be no Eric Armstead. You have Jimmy Ward playing nickel, which has kind of been a thing. I don't know if we sounded too happy about that. So we got to see. The Niners may not be whole in this game, so it may not be your average, whoop up on the Rams to get healthy again.
It's interesting. You pointed out. Oh, go ahead, Zane. I was going to say, you pointed out those offenses, right? Denver and LA, the lowest scoring offense. 49ers only scoring 20 points a game. I'd be interested to know what the Packers are. I don't think it's much higher than that. These Kyle Shanahan offenses are woefully underperforming this season. And it genuinely feels like defenses have figured out how to stop these offenses, and these offenses have not figured out how to adapt and throw something else, right? It's like these teams have a wipeout slider, but they have figured out how to hit that slider, and now they don't have any other, pitch to try and get them out. So the Rams are coming off a bye. I would imagine that they've tried to figure that kind of stuff out. But yeah, it is an interesting and troubling trend for these offenses.
Also, it's going to be a game where the Rams don't even try to throw the ball. They're 32nd in league in rushing attempts, right? They're last in league, so they don't even try to throw the ball. So having Jimmy Ward, that's 32nd rushing. They only try to run the ball, so they're going to be throwing the ball. So having Jimmy Ward play slot with the club on his hand, I mean, look, he was a top 100 player last year when he played safety. And I like that Tashawn Gibson is a really good player, and I really like him a lot. But like, if you're going to play Jimmy Ward, like I really believe that you should play him at safety. However, I want to counter my own point by saying that a couple of years ago, before they opened SoFi, the last year in the Coliseum when they played, Jimmy Ward was just on Cooper Kupp the entire game. Do you guys remember that? He was on Cooper Kupp the entire game and locked him up, right? And he came up with the game-saving sort of pass breakup. Granted, that was when Jared Goff was quarterback, so the quarterback situation was much different there. But I understand what they're trying to do, because they're trying to take their best player away by putting, the 49ers one of their best defensive backs, arguably their best defensive back on their best player. But that being said, if they turn the ball over like they have been, you can't win games like that. When you are constantly behind in turnover margin, you are giving the other team extra opportunities to score. And it's not going to take a perfect game to beat the Rams, but I think that if they end up turning the ball over 3 or 4 times like they did against Kansas City, they're not going to win because their defense is not. They're injured. They're hurt. Like they're not built to overcome that right now because of those injuries. So I don't know. Like in terms of who I really think will win this game, I hope the Niners will win, right? But they're just so hard to predict. Also, really quickly, talking about the idea of offenses or defenses catching up to Kyle Shanahan's scheme around the league. Going back to last game, I know we argued that the wrap up show for last week, but did you guys notice that the way that Kansas City played that second half? Steve Spagnuolo on defense. Steve Spagnuolo brought the blitz almost on every single passing attempt, and that's the exact same way they played the entire fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. And Niners still had no answer for it. And to me, it's like they got to evolve as an offense overall, right? Like you got to. It's been 3 years that you had to figure that out, and you still haven't been able to do that. So that's what troubles me with this offense. Is like, all right, cool. They may try the same stuff that's worked against the Rams, but the Rams may be ready for it because the offense it doesn't evolve, and it hasn't evolved. So I'm optimistic that they can win if they can limit the turnovers and control the clock and get the running game going with McCaffrey. He's going to get basically a boatload of carries this game. He's taking a lot of first team reps in practice. It's been reported. So they are looking at using him more than the 9 plays that they used him last week against Kansas City. But that being said, like they have to capitalize on that too. And what I want to see is I want to see him on the field when they're near the goal line, right? Like the Jimmy interception was stupid as hell, right? That was just a terrible decision by him. But even to have Christian McCaffrey out there, even as like a decoy to draw coverage, it'll open somebody else up, right? It'll give a look that they haven't seen before. I don't want him out. I don't want him off the field in situations like that, right? Like it wouldn't prevent the interception, right? That's not what I'm getting at. But what I'm saying is that to have him on the field is a plus for you. So I want him on the field, even if he's not getting the ball. Put him on the field. Draw some tension, draw some coverage.
The defense has to account for him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, Al.
I was going to say a couple of things to look at. Yeah, the Rams have not been running the ball well, but I wish I knew who put the stat up. I just happened to see it. I give him credit if I knew. But in the 3 games Eric Armstead's played, the Niners have allowed 64 rushing yards this season and 1 rushing touchdown. The 4 games he has not, 111 yards rushing and 6 rushing TDs, and he's still really banged up. So I have to see what happens there. The other thing is, I don't know when Armstead's coming back. I'm starting to get worried about that injury. The other thing is the Niners spent all this, Oren Burks and Ray McCloud trying to get special teams better this offseason, right? Well, they've allowed 3 returns of 45-plus yards the last 3 weeks. They have not looked good, the special teams at all. So that's something that worries me a little bit, too, in a game like this that could be close. It wasn't as much as the Niners dominated the last game, it was still a 1-score game late. If there's a special teams turnover, if the Rams break a big return, something like that can change the game. So, the Niners not being good in all 3 phases or being sloppy or inconsistent in all 3 phases, that can eventually turn the game around. And that worries me a little bit too.
The 49ers were ranked 26th in DVOA and special teams at the end of 2021. They fired Richard Hightower. They brought in Brian Schneider, and they spent money in free agency on 3 players that were eyed almost exclusively for special teams in Ray McCloud, Oren Burks, and George Odom. All of that upheaval, all of that change. Richard Hightower went to Chicago. Chicago has the 5th ranked special teams by DVOA, and the 49ers are still 26th this season. Yikes. Like you put a lot of effort into changing that, and it didn't do anything. And there are certain things about this special teams unit where I'm like, I don't understand. Like, why is Robbie Gould on kickoffs? And B, why aren't you just kicking out of the back of the end zone? If your kickoff coverage has proven to suck, which it has, stop kicking it short. Just stop. Like, I don't feel like it's that difficult. Also, you almost got Robbie Gould injured. Get Mitch back out there, right? The guy who played rugby, let him tackle a few guys, but also let him kick it out of the back of the end zone. Like, what are we doing? Why do we continue to run up, slam our head against the wall doing the same thing over and over if it's showing that it's not working? That stat that you talked about, Al, that was Akash. Akash put that up about Armstead's presence versus his absence. And yeah, I mean, he seems to be the key to their run defense, and he won't be back. But here's the thing, like Zain said earlier, the Rams basically don't even try and run the football anymore. You know, they've got Cam Akers, but they're trying to trade him, and he doesn't practice with the team. And then they've got, I think, Henderson, and that's about it. So it'll be interesting, but they've also had 2 weeks to try and get it figured out. So the thing that I think is interesting about this offense, and people like to point to the offensive line. People pointed to the offensive line as one of the things that will hold this offense back. Through 7 weeks, the 49ers offensive line is the 5th ranked pass blocking unit by PFF in the entire NFL. The Eagles are 1. Herein lies the rub. They are the 19th ranked run blocking offensive line, which is bonkers because it's always been flipped since Kyle Shanahan has been here. So I think ultimately you're looking at what amounts to probably one of the big reasons why this offense is so disjointed right now. The offensive line is not run blocking like they should be, and the run game has suffered because of it. And when the run game suffers, so does the entire offense, because the offense is built around that run game. And so what I am looking for specifically is that with Christian McCaffrey, right? The Rams do a lot to defend the outside zone. They love to run an over front, right? They like to have 6 guys on the line to defend the wide zone. And I think speed has been what has been missing in the wide zone for the 49ers offense since Elijah Mitchell went out. Now you've got McCaffrey, you could run it again, but the Rams are going to be key to stop it. So what I'm interested to see is what kind of running game they get with Christian McCaffrey. Do they try and just hammer that outside zone, even though they know that LA is looking to defend it? And then let's get Christian McCaffrey some touches in the passing game as well. 2 weeks ago, the Panthers played the Rams, and McCaffrey had 158 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown. I would love to see something similar from him in this game. The other thing that I'm hoping to see, and I don't know that we'll see it this week because I don't know that Debo's going to be playing, but I would love to start to see some more 2-back sets with Debo and McCaffrey lined up in the backfield, right? Either one of them can take the handoff. Either one of them can go on a route. Both of them can go out on a route. And then also once Juice gets back, so they'll be missing Kyle Juszczyk this game. What does that look like? Do we see Ross Dwelly?
Totally forgot about Juszczyk.
Yeah. Yep. Do we see Ross Dwelly? Probably. Do we see Charlie Warner? Both? I don't know. Do we see more 2-back sets with 2 running backs as opposed to a fullback? It'll be interesting to see. But when Juice does come back, I would also like to see, now that McCaffrey's on the team, Juice motioning out of like 21 personnel, right? So 21 is 2 running backs, a tight end, right? So the 49ers, when they run 21, almost exclusively run it with Kyle Juszczyk at fullback and then a running back. I would like to see Juszczyk motion out and Debo motion in, right? Now all of a sudden you've got mismatches everywhere. So I think Kyle Shanahan is excited to play with his new toy. I just don't think we're going to see as much of it this week. I think it's going to be a pretty vanilla game plan when it comes to McCaffrey in this offense. But once you get past that bye, it'll be interesting to see kind of how he employs or deploys him.
Man, so many injuries. I forgot about Juszczyk. It's like, who isn't injured?
Right?
Jason Poe. I want to see Jason Poe in the backfield. I want to see Jason Poe
fullback. Jason Poe is an absolute dream of mine. Like I cannot wait to see that happen.
I saw that tweet of yours, so that's a shout out to your tweet, right?
Thank you.
But the running game guys, like what the biggest difference is the interior line positions are all different. I mean, Aaron Banks has been fantastic, by the way. Burford's been okay too, but the center position, Brendel has not been very good. Like he has constantly gotten beat. He has not been very good at all. And I'll put a stat out that I saw on Twitter from Johnny Dowell's FA. So the 49ers since 2019, with Weston Richburg, they were 11-2, and without him, they were 23-23. And I'm not saying it's his responsibility, his departure that has caused that record, because a lot of other things happened. But when you have a good center and you have a good person kind of like making the calls at the line and the guy that's the anchor of your line, it changes everything. Like remember the Niners with Harbaugh had Jonathan Goodwin, right? And he was a fantastic pickup for that line. It was really important. And the Niners of the 80s and of Walsh and all this stuff. Center was an emphasis for them. And Kyle just hasn't emphasized that. Like I'd even argue that you would put Brunskill at center and he would do better than Brendel, right? And yet they haven't. So that is to me like one of the reasons why they haven't been able to run the ball well. So anyways, we got to make predictions, guys. What do we got?
I'm not picking them again until I'm not picking them again.
Okay.
I'm not doing it. I'm not. And I'm not even picking them after this week because if they beat the Rams, they have to show me consistently. I'm not picking them. I don't know what the score is going to be, but they're going to lose. That's my prediction. That's where I am mentally. I'm emotionally terrorized. Loss.
All right, Brian.
I'm going to go 4-4 this week, and I'm going to keep my pattern going. I can't pick against them. I don't have it in me. I am not from the East Coast. There's a
angry.
Which by the way, there is a musical artist named Noah Kahn who just released an album last week, and in one of the songs he says one of the lines is "I'm mean because I grew up in New England." I'm like, that's such a good line. But anyway, regardless, I think their regular season dominance continues. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think it's going to be a dogfight, and I think it's probably going to be low scoring. So I'm going to say 49ers 20, Rams. We'll go Rams 17.
I'm going to drive you guys up the wall right now. This wall behind me. I'm going to drive you up that wall behind me. They're going to tie.
Oh no!
Oh man!
How are they going to tie? They're going to tie, and we're going to come in this podcast and be like, "What are we going to talk about?" Just for the content, I'm going to say they're going to tie, and everybody watching this and be like, "Zane, you dumbass!" But hey, man, I don't know what they are. I don't know if they're going to win or lose. So I'm just going to say they're going to tie. Like they're going to go 3-4 and or however 3-4 and 6 the rest of the way. No, the rest of the way, 3, 4, and 6. 6 ties the rest of the way after this, right? Like,
oh my
7 ties or whatever it is after this.
I can't say anything would surprise me at this point. So,
all
right, well, we'll be back, guys, to break it all down as usual. For Brian and Zane, this is Al.
Peace.
Later.